Joining us. This is our 15-minute webinar series. We're going to try to keep this to 15 minutes to respect your time. Thank you for joining us. Okay, this month we're doing managing vendor catalogs in Maximo. Let's just to start off with a little overview. What is a typical vendor catalog? Oops, a listing of all items that vendor carries. Ideally, the most current information about specs, about the item, including things like price, which is very important to you guys. Now, vendor catalogs. Remember the old Sears catalog? Yes, they were pretty much consumer oriented clothing and stuff like that, but they had home and hardware and auto stuff. You could buy just about anything on those, but they listed everything. Here's a Nintendo game, the old ping pong. You could buy guns on there. You could buy, wheelbarrows. You could buy even house plans. They had everything. That was the old Sears that they're kind of a little bit bygone era. But even today, there's some companies that could produce a catalog. I just received up a Uline a couple of days ago. Nice thick catalog with lots of industrial supplies and cleaning supplies and other things like that. So they're still around, but most vendors have gone digital, starting with Amazon, pushing the issue a long time ago. But now just about everyone's gone digital, including industrial suppliers like Grainger, Fastenal, and many others. And they provide the details basically online, all the specs, all the information, as well as the pricing and other details. So this is all available online. Now, vendor catalog, what options do you have? Well, you can use the online catalog, and most people currently use the online catalog, but they use it, independently of Maximo. So I call that a swivel chair interface. You're going back and forth from one system to the other, swivel chairing back and forth. You have two windows open, searching the catalog in one window and then copying, pasting it to the other. This leads to copy and paste errors. It's time consuming, it's tedious, and so forth. It's difficult to do competitive shopping as well, as you have to go one at a time. Now, you can punch out. So we actually have this product called Punch Out integration from Maximo. You can punch out the vendor catalogs online. It's much more efficient, much more accurate. Okay, but it's still difficult to do competitive shopping, because you still have to go one vendor at a time. Now you can also do punch out to marketplace, which we support that as well with the Druzy and the BuyerQuest marketplace. And you can use their local hosted catalogs, and therefore it's a lot more efficient and accurate, but also it supports competitive shopping. So this is a way, those are the options you can use the online catalogs. What about basically using a vendor supply, a local version of the catalog? Vendors can provide you with their electronic copy of their entire catalog. A long time ago, they were doing it using the CDs. They'll give you a CD with everything on it. Now you can just download it off the internet. Okay, but here's the question. If the vendor provides you with the electronic copy of their catalog, what would you do with it? Where would you put it? There really isn't a place in Maximo to store it right now. Okay. You could use it like you use an online catalog, right? Just two separate windows and a swivel chair interface going back and forth, and copy and paste from the catalog to Maximo and all that stuff. But issues like before, copy and paste errors, time consuming, tedious, and so forth. So that's not really a solution. So is there another option? Yes, there is. You can store the vendor catalogs in Maximo. Not out of the box. You need to do some enhancing of Maximo, but you can do that to basically host the vendor catalogs in Maximo. This is the point of this webinar. This is what we're going to talk about from here on. Okay, first of all, what does Maximo have? Maximo does have a table called INV vendor table. It's a listing, a subset of all items that a vendor carries and that you previously purchased with the last purchase details, including the last price. It's a quasi vendor catalog, but not really. So what's wrong with the INV vendor table? The most obvious is that it's basically backwards looking, not forward looking. It's telling you about what you did in the past, the price you got last time. That could be a week ago, it could be a year ago, it could be 10 years ago. So that price might not be relevant anymore. Also, the way it's organized and governed. The key to the record on the INV vendor table is the vendor item ID, sorry, the vendor ID, the item ID, the catalog ID, the manufacturer ID, and the model number. This makes it very challenging and difficult to use. Conceptually, the key to vendor catalog should really be the vendor and the catalog ID, and that's it. Everything else should be just attributes, not keys to the record. That makes that table very challenging to use.
I did not
And the
know
way it's
you could
presented,
see
it's
this.
displayed on the item master, okay, as under the vendor tab, and in the inventory
Um,
record under the viewer tab. But really, it's a separate object on its own. If the vendor catalog is a separate object, should be represented on its own, and should be listed under the vendor and under the items itself. And it's only available for items which you have an item master record for. So you can't have materials or miscellaneous items listed. You can only have things that are currently listed in your item master. that makes it very limited and restrictive. So what do we need to do to basically add the vendor catalogs to Maximo? Well, we have to add the vendor catalog itself, the table. So we've created a table, okay, and then we have view or visibility to that table from the vendor master, so you can actually see the catalog item supplied by that vendor, and we have a view from the item master where you can actually see all the vendors that can supply and the versions of that item that they can supply. Okay, so the table plus views from the vendor and from the item master. Okay, so the vendor table itself is a new application. So now there's a new application called vendor catalog. We renamed it to master instead of items. Okay, but basically it's a table that's got all the vendor catalog items by vendor, by their catalog number, and other details, including price and so forth, all consolidated in one spot. If you want to see the catalog for Grainger, you so use this filter mechanism. You type in Grainger, and you'll see the Grainger items in there. If you want to see a particular manufacturer model number and all the vendors that offer it, you put in the filtering for manufacturer model number here, and you'll see all the offerings for different vendors and so forth, their prices, and you pick the best one that the one that works best for you. So these are the attributes that we added in there. We're still reviewing this. We might add some additional attributes, but this is the conceptually the way it works. And then we've added that view to that table from the vendor itself. So when you go to the company table, the company application, which is really the vendor's application, we've added a new tab called vendor catalog items, and we list out all the catalog items that this vendor, in this case Grainger, offers. So this is a listing of everything Grainger offers that's in your Maximo database. And similarly, we've added something like this from the item master to show all the vendors, suppliers that carry this instance of this item as well. So you can see who can offer this item. Now, what else do we need to do? So now we have it. And yes, you can manually type in all the vendor catalog records and all that stuff, but I mean, that's a long, tedious process, right? The vendors are willing to supply to you electronically, so why not use that information and import it? So we need to add an import and synchronization utility. Let me talk about synchronization a little bit later, but first of all, import. So there's got to be catalog import utility. So the vendor gives you a CD or do you download from their internet site, okay? You need to map it. Different vendors have different versions of the catalog. So for each vendor, you have to have a mapping exercise to basically map the fields into the standard vendor catalog master table in Maximo. Okay. Secondly, you need some filtering. Okay, the vendor like Grainger will have 1.5 million items. You don't want to import 1.5 million items into Maximo. One, it's a huge table, allows more storage space, slow down the process and all that. But secondly, you may not want to buy everything that Grainger offers. You may only buy a certain category of goods from Grainger, and therefore you want to limit that. So filter that entire table into just what you want to see for your organization. And secondly, you don't want to just blindly import that into Maximo. You want to review it. You want to compare it. You want to see what adjustments were made. Is there a 70% price increase on certain items? You want to maybe talk to the vendor before you apply it. Are there obsolete items that you may want to deal with right now when you find out they're obsolete? So you may go look for a substitute vendor or a substitute item from this same vendor. Okay, but you deal with it when you find out that an item is obsolete, as opposed to when the asset breaks down and you're desperately searching for them, and then you find out it's obsolete. So these are utilities that basically make the importing process from whatever the vendor supplies into your Maximo vendor catalog master database. Now, next thing is really peculiar to Maximo, because Maximo out of the box uses the INV vendor table to default who you should buy from, the price, and all that stuff. Okay, instead of us switching Maximo, changing the source code of Maximo to use our new vendor catalog master, what we do is we continue letting Maximo use this table, and we synchronize. So we import the vendor catalog master, but we synchronize the information with the INV vendor table. So the INV vendor table now contains the current pricing. So when Maximo out of the box keeps using the INV vendor table, it's using it with the updated current information. So Maximo can continue to use INV vendor table as it does right now, and we make no source code changes. Basically, Maximo continues working as always. Okay, now, how does this all work? Well, first of all, the vendor supplies the file to you. Okay, you need to import that file into a table in the Maximo database, but you want to filter it out. Like I said, the Grainger gives you 1.2 million records. You don't want to import that. You want to import just the category of goods that you buy from Grainger. You may have other filtering criteria. So we'll save the filtering criteria by vendor and we'll only import the ones that matter to you. Once you have this table, now you want to import this table into your master, vendor catalog master, but you want to do a comparison. You want to review. You want to see what changed, what items got dropped, what items were added, what prices changes, and so forth. You want to review and approve before you just import into Maximo. Once you've done that process, so you're okay with it, then you say update, and it updates Maximo vendor catalog master. Okay. That's the first step. The second step is this process of synchronizing it with the INVVENDOR table. So INVVENDOR table has records for your items that you have an item master record for. So this is item master record in Maximo. This is, but there's stuff in between that Grainger carries that you don't have in your item master in Maximo. That's okay. The catalog master will have everything you could potentially buy from Grainger. Your INVVENDOR table just has the stuff that you previously bought from Grainger. And then we update this information so the INVVENDOR table has the current pricing information and other details, so it's accurate, current, and complete. So when Maximo uses this table, it will keep using it correctly out of the box, but with accurate, current information. Then what do we need to do? We need to enable it. Now that you have the vendor catalog in Maximo, we need to let you use it, get value out of it. Okay, so we add an internal search of the vendor catalog from the purchase requisition, desktop requisition, work order tracking, and other areas where you need to find items. We show all the options, who are all the vendors that offer it, maybe different models, manufacturers, and so forth, with the pricing and all that stuff, so you can choose what's most appropriate to you. Now, we can also add an external punch out to vendors on that catalog. Like I said, Grainger carries 1.2 million items. You may only import 10,000 into Maximo that you typically buy from them. But if you don't find it in that 10,000, you may want to punch out to Grainger and search their 1.2 million catalog to find something peculiar. If that's the case, we have to have that as an option. Okay, now, remember I said this is the vendor catalog master that has everything that you typically buy from a vendor. This only has what you previously bought. This is the INVVENDOR table in Maximo, that's things that you previously bought. We synchronize those. Okay, once we synchronize it, okay, Maximo continues to use this table, the INVVENDOR table, out of the box without source code changes or anything, to use it to default the pricing information and the default vendor and all that stuff on your requisitions and other objects. Okay, now we, on the other hand, will use this table to search for other items that were not necessarily in the INVVENDOR table. So these things you may have never bought before, you may not have an item master record for, but at some point in time you may want one of these. We let you search for these other items that the vendor carries that you've never purchased or have never defined in Maximo. Okay, or if you want to just do price comparison, I have a default from Grainger, but maybe I want to search other vendors. Show me the same item from multiple vendors. We use this table to show this from any other vendor that may have it in their catalog master. Okay, so internally, how do we do this? How do we make use of this information? Well, for example, on the purchase requisition, we add a field called a button called vendor catalog. When you press that button, it lists off the catalog, and you use the filtering criteria to specify either an item number or a description or a manufacturer model number or whatever it is, and it gives you a list of competing offers from competing vendors, and you choose the one that's best for you. Now, you can choose multiple vendors. Okay, Maximo the box does not support multiple vendors in a single PR, but we do. We move the vendor information at the line level so you can select things from multiple vendors, add lines with different vendors from different lines. And then when we create the purchase order, we will create multiple POs, one for every vendor on your PR. And I just talked about that itself, so I'm going to move on. And the reason you punch out, just explain that further. So you have your item master record of things that you have in inventory or defined. You have the vendor catalogs, will may carry more things from the vendors carry. This is their entire catalog or sub catalog. Okay, but if it's a sub catalog, then you sometimes want to search the entire catalog. That's why instead of just what's in the vendor master in Maximo, you may want to punch out the vendor catalog on the internet, okay, and search their entire catalog. Like I said, Grainger 1.2 million, search that whole catalog and find it and bring it back into Maximo if you need that functionality. Okay. And then there's other things that we can do. We can specify the manufacturer on the item master itself. We find it odd that IBM Maximo has the manufacturer at the vendor level, at the inventory level, the storm level, but not at the item level itself. So what we did was we actually moved the item manufacturer information to to the item level and the new tab called manufacturer. And you can say it has to be a very specific. It can only be this manufacturer, this model number. Okay. Or you could say it could be from a list of approved. You got 3, 4, 5, as many on this list, and we'll just check, make sure it's one of these that's on the approved list. Or you can say it's a generic. And if it's generic, we won't care. You can select any vendor, any manufacturer, any model number, and we'll just approve it if it's a generic item. What else can we do? Last thing that I'm going to talk about is basically we can enable the portal access, a portal for the vendors to access the portal, update, and load their catalog on their own. So instead of you doing it, the vendor does it. So the process I explained earlier, where you come in, you get this file, you download it or whatever, you go to filtering to import this into the vendor catalog staging table, and then you review it, import it in here. Well, this process right here, instead of you doing it, basically you can have the vendors using the portal. The vendors can go in, they can import into the portal, and then that goes into directly into Maximo. So saving you a few steps if the vendors are willing and able to do that. And I won't go through this process. We're running out of time, so I'm going to just skip and just summarize. The vendor catalog information is available for vendors. They're willingly making this available, so why not use it? Vendor catalogs can be hosted internally in Maximo. Okay, you can have the whole full catalog, or more likely a subset of just the things that you typically buy, category of goods that you buy from them. Okay, Maximo defaulting will use the current vendor catalog information, but not from the vendor catalog, but from the INV vendor table. So there's no changes to the source code. Okay, but it will have accurate current information. Vendor catalogs can be used to select items, specific items, if you wish to purchase from different vendors. You can compare prices from different vendors, different offerings, different models, different manufacturers, and so forth. And then you can use the vendor catalog data now that you have it in Maximo to upgrade and clean up your internal item master data as well. So you have this information from the vendors, you can now use it to do cleanup and cleansing of your item master information. So you have more accurate descriptions and so forth in your item master. And then you may want to supplement it with the punch outs to basically get the availability, delivery projections, and you might want to shop the full vendor catalog, but you have most of it in the catalog in Maximo itself. And lastly, I'm just going to say, if you want to find out more about supply chain issues, opportunities, innovations, we annually conduct a supply chain matters conference in Houston, Ontario. We did one Houston, Texas. We did one a couple of months ago. The next one is the fourth one is March of 27. And thank you very much. We're going to stop right here. But if you have further questions, please stick around and we'll be happy to take them. Thank you.